Welcome to the latest edition of Here's What We Know, the podcast of unexpected conversations. And I am excited when they said, hey, do you want to talk to this guy from Trans-Siberian Orchestra? And I'm like, which guy? And they're like, oh, the guy, the guy. And I'm like, well, yes, I want to talk to the guy. But before we get to him, I want to remind you to share this podcast, share it with your friends, your family, and support our sponsors, because without them, we don't even get a chance to do it. But this guy is Al Pitrelli. Al, let me tell you a story, right?
Yes, sir.
My team who helps me put this on, right? And I said, hey, you know who I'm talking to? I'm going to talk to Al Pitrelli this week. And Universal, they all go, Al Pitrelli. I said, Trans-Siberian Orchestra. Oh, my God.
Awesome.
I've talked to some big stars. I've talked to some big names. I've never seen them more excited.
Well, I appreciate that and thank them for me. But that just goes to show you that the Trans-Siberian Orchestra that was created by Paul O'Neill 28 years ago has a universality to it that I didn't see on the radar. And I'm so proud of what it's become and what it's still becoming every day. So thank you so much to them. And thank you to you for having me on today.
Now,
I'm looking forward to working.
I'm so having fun because you're just such a kick in the pants. First of all, look at you. You're a flipping rock star, and you still look like a rock star. Did you play with Alice Cooper? Is that what I heard?
I did. 1989, I became Alice's musical director. And I didn't really know it at the time. Why would I have known it at the time? But part of my education that was going to lead me to Paul O'Neill. Alice... It was my first introduction to theatrical presentation of rock and roll on an arena level. And I remember watching Cooper. 1 minute he's Alice singing School's Out or, I don't know, 18. And the next minute he's in a straitjacket and we're performing the Ballad of Dwight Fry. And I looked in his eyes and he was no longer Alice Cooper. He was Dwight Fry, the character from his story. And I remember going, that's like one of the coolest things I've ever, first of all, seen and stood next to. Little did I know that that was going to help my education or answer my education for what Paul O'Neill was going to need from me as not only a guitar player and as musical director, because it's a theatrical presentation of characters written into his story to tell this timeless tale called The Ghost of Christmas Eve. So yeah, my time with Alice was much more valuable than even though I thought at the time what it was, and it's helped me out immensely over the years.
Well, and it makes perfect sense because Vincent Furnier figured out a way to create this character, Alice Cooper, and he could be as rock and roll as he wanted, but Vincent had his head on straight. I mean, you talk about, and you've mentioned this about Paul O'Neill, and I'd love to get on that because I know we're pressed for time because everybody in the world wants to talk to Al Pitrelli, and I had to grab my time and hold on to it.
Except my wife today. She's done with me. She wants me to get out of the house and go to work.
I hear you.
I can't blame the woman.
Yeah, we've all moved to home studios now because of the way the world works, and my wife could be not more chagrined if she could. It could be. But I mean, as far as we get back to it, Vincent Furnier, if you don't know, is the guy who created the character Alice Cooper. He's become known as Alice Cooper, but he had, and he's one of the most straight-laced, sharp, acute businessmen you'll ever meet, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Agreed. Alice in the 70s, I've heard stories. He's alluded to stories, some craziness, whatever went on. And when I got out there, it was an immediate education on this is a business. We don't got time for any silliness, if you will. And he'd be on the bus watching Jackie Chan movies, drinking Diet 7-Ups, just being a normal dude until it was showtime. And then he'd get dressed and come out of his dressing room. And I was like, oh, there he is. Okay. On stage and off stage, a professional, a gentleman, an important part of my life, in many, many ways. And I remember running into him. It was, he was doing a show the night after TSO was playing somewhere. I think it was up in Canada. And I remember running into him in the hotel lobby and he put his arms around me and gave me a big hug. I hadn't seen him in 20 something years. And he goes, aren't you glad I fired you? At the time, not so happy. In retrospect, it worked out pretty good. But what a wonderful human being. Can't say enough about him and his manager, Shep Gordon, and the organization. Great, great people.
Isn't it funny? I've been fired once in my life. And when I got fired, I was just, I mean, it was just tragic. And oh my gosh, and I can't believe this happened. And and I look back on it now as the single greatest professional gift that was ever given to me. Because I would never have had the career I've had. I wouldn't have my wife. I would not have my kids.
100%.
Yeah. But at the time, you're so in the forest, there's no trees.
It's weird because, the more yesterdays that I have tomorrows to come, in theory, it's those little lefts and right turns and those moments that happen in your life that cause you and I to be sitting down right now having this conversation. If one of us wasn't fired or one of us made a left instead of a right, this conversation is null and void, not going to happen. Short story to how bizarre life can be. 1985, I got my first real professional job working for a guy named Michael Bolton. Right?
Michael Bolton.
Michael Bolton had a wonderful record out on the radio called Fool's Game, and his follow-up album was called Everybody's Crazy. Now, I had been playing, clubs since like the middle 70s, but this was the first national act I got to sink my teeth into. Anyway, long and short of it is the tour only lasted like 6 shows. It didn't matter. But in his management office was a guy, an upcoming producer, who I met, and he goes, man, I love what you're doing. It's good to see somebody else from Long Island, kicking it in New York City, blah, 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 blah. His name was Paul O'Neill. And he goes, one day we're going to work together. And 10 years later, 1995 is when he called me up to start what was to become the Trans-Siberian Orchestra, So you're talking about just life being life and fired, hired, whatever. But it's a very peculiar, circuitous journey. And if you change one thing, dude, we ain't here together today.
Amen. Where did Paul get this vision? I mean, because it's arguably, his family and his estate and stuff, but you were there from the building blocks, weren't you?
Day one.
Yeah.
Day one.
And so nobody has probably a more intimate view of this vision than you.
The long and the short of it is I had started making a pretty good name for myself, working for Alice, kicking around New York City, doing a lot of sessions, a lot of records, a lot of tours, and just, became a hired gun guitar player. That was fine. That's what I wanted to do, is play guitar. Not genre-specific guitar playing. 1 minute I'm with Alice Cooper, 1 minute I'm recording a Celine Dion record, and everything in between. I remember doing a Donny Osmond record and a Dee Snider record at the same time frame, I just love playing the guitar and I love music. Now, at my age, you go back to my education in the 60s, AM radio was it. And the two genres of music that existed back then was good and bad. That's all we had, right? WABC, AM, 77 ABC. 1 minute it's a Stone song, a Beatles song, a Beach Boys song, a Gladys Knight piece, Leonard Bernstein, one of his works from West Side Story, Julie Andrews. Didn't matter. You just love all kinds of music. Paul O'Neill, the same thing. He grew up in New York City, going to see Zeppelin or Pink Floyd at the Garden, going to see Bernstein conduct the New York Philharmonic at Lincoln Center. Somewhere in between is the Theater District on Broadway, Andrew Lloyd Webber's works that were coming out. This was his education. This is what he loved. He loved all forms of music, and he loved to be a great storyteller. He loved it. So he had this idea, and he'd been kicking the idea around for a long time. He told me, as we developed a wonderful relationship, that he heard this God Rest You Merry Gentlemen, Carol the Bells thing in his head. And he pitched it to a couple bands he was producing over the years, and they're like, hey, we ain't doing no Christmas music. So you go back to the Michael Bolton story. 10 years later, he calls him. He goes, I'm working on this project. I'd love for you to come in. I've heard a lot of guitar players have been playing, but they're playing like guitar players, and I need somebody who's going to think more like an underscoring for film. All right. I said, I got you. I go into the studio, and he puts up the faders on what's to become Christmas Eve Sarajevo 1224. And I'm like, dude, what's with the Christmas song? And he laughed. He goes, it's not really a Christmas song. It's more a soundtrack depicting events that took place on Christmas Eve during the war in Sarajevo. I said, all right, you got my attention. So he said, there was a cellist, a classically trained cellist, who would go into the town square every night and perform Christmas music, classical themes, Beethoven, Chopin, Mozart, whatever, Tchaikovsky. in protest to the bombing raids, right? So he's telling me this story, and the hair on my arm is starting to stand up. He's like, "Well, what's up?" And I said, "Dude, I played in Zagreb and Belgrade before the war. I was in that town square you're talking about when I was Cooper's MD."
Wow.
I said, "Press record." And I went, it was in a lot better tune when I recorded, but whatever. Anyway. And he started whistling, ba-da-da-da, and I'm looking at him like, yeah, yeah. Then what? And he goes, "Then here come the bombers," and the bombs drop. And I'm like, he's like, "That's it, the stormtroopers." And I'm like, "Yeah." And we kind of looked at each other, and it was just one of those moments that, again, going back to the front of our conversation, you couldn't script this, my background, his background, our chance meeting. And now we're in the studio, and he's putting up the Thetis to be what's one of the most important pieces of music ever, or certainly in my life, and a lot of other lives, and that was it. And then, and he looked at me and he goes, "I just want to make great art. I don't care about commercial success and blah, blah, blah." He goes, "If we make great art, maybe it'll catch on. But if it doesn't catch on, at least we are responsible for something that didn't exist. It's beautiful, Well, needless to say, it caught on. And 28 years ago, just about now, it accidentally ended up in a couple DJs' hands, and they played it on the radio. It was on. Lightning strike.
Let me tell you how it worked from my side, because I was one of those DJs. And you know what we used it for? We used it for commercial music to talk about Christmas. And what happened is we would do the commercial, and we would have the Trans-Siberian playing in the background for Christmas commercials. Yeah. We would start getting requests for the commercials. Mm-hmm. So they could hear the music. That is a true story, Al. And it's the only time it's ever happened in my entire career. And that's when we all knew, hey, y'all, this is crazy. And so we started playing the Trans-Siberian during Christmas time. We would play these things, and it all started because it was in the background of commercials. And it was so overwhelming and so powerful. And I get why Paul got you, because you're a guitarist, but first and foremost, you are a musician, and a musician in the best sense of the word. That he completely nailed it when he said, let's create something beautiful. If we create something beautiful, then that's all we need to do. And it'll go from there. Whatever's going to happen, it'll go from there. But if it's beautiful, it's going to be amazing.
Yeah. Listen, you got a hit or something special on your hands when talk radio is playing your song. And it was like, country stations were playing it. AAA stations, when there was still AOR radio, was playing it. And when I found out, sports radio was playing it. I just want to get the Jets score and the song. You know what I mean? And it was a moment my brother, I remember it like it was yesterday, being in the studio, hearing it for the first time. I said, I don't know if anybody's ever going to hear this, but this has been one of the greatest nights of my life, especially musically. To watch the birth, it's like watching one of my children being born. Here's this infant, just opened its eyes like, hold it, protect it, keep it warm, feed it, save, change its diaper, whatever you got to do. And the infant becomes a toddler, and the toddler is growing into young adult. And now that child's 28 years old and is like president of the United States, exceeded every one of my expectations. Or that child became Patrick Mahomes, whatever you want to equate it to. Oh my God. And it's still growing, and people are still falling in love with it. And it's still important. And his story is more relevant now than it was when I first helped him record it 28 years ago. And it has been an unbelievably fascinating journey and ride, and I'm glad that you and I are talking about it, and we can continue to talk about it for years to come, God willing.
Well, yeah, listen, it's a date every year. If you want, every year, I'm in. I want to take a quick break. I'm going to come right back because I want to ask you how you survived the loss of Paul. We're going to come right back with Here's What We Know right here. I am so excited to be working with the Nugent Family Counseling Center, founded by Dr. Jeff Nugent. They have 3 office locations in San Jose, Santa Clara, and Reno, Nevada. What they do is support a diverse community of children, adolescents, adults, and families who are affected by conditions such as addiction, depression, anxiety, trauma, stress, and grief. They strive to provide clients with the tools needed to understand and acknowledge the effects that their emotions and behaviors have on themselves and their personal relationships. As Dr. Nugent told me, we try to help our clients fix what's wrong. They don't want you coming forever. They want to help you get past this problem. And they also remind families what they love about each other and utilize a combination of individual, family, and couples therapy. They can help you no matter what you're facing. You do not have to go through this alone. Check out NugentTherapy.com. NugentTherapy.com. You can do this, and they can help. Let's talk relationships. Scary, huh? My friend Stephanie Flood can help. She's offering a video series that'll help you reconnect. You can do it by yourself or together. Shows a kinder and gentler way of interacting with your partner, and that can lead to them responding the same way. And Steph is offering a 100% money-back guarantee if you follow the steps and it doesn't improve the lines of communication. That's not all. Go to afloodoflove.com today, enter the promo code Gary to get a 20% discount off the video series. It's afloodoflove.com. So I do want, because we lost Paul. We lost Paul a number of years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was his vision, and you were his muse. That's my take, right?
Yeah.
How did you survive? How did it keep from going? Because I realized it had started growing to a big situation. It wasn't as big as it got, but it was getting there. You could see it. How did you survive the loss of Paul O'Neill?
Professionally?
Both.
Okay, so let's start professionally first. Paul used to tell me, one day I want this to outlive all of us. We used to just talk about it, whatever. We spent literally half my life sitting next to the guy in the studio or on a tour bus or in an airplane, We talk about it. We became the best of friends. He was my big brother. He's my teacher in a lot of ways. My job was to make him smile and just make him laugh on occasion when he was starting to bug out, and help him bring his musical vision to fruition. His family, his wife and daughter have been there from the beginning, and have continued to help his legacy live on. So professionally, it was a blow like anything else. Paul was a very huge fan of Walt Disney, and, Walt, I don't know anything about the story really other than Walt Disney certainly has continued on, because the map was there, here's the secret map or the treasure map. Just keep following the map, A lot of material Paul left us with, unfinished songs. So we have a lot of work to do yet. But with his family, at the helm, if you will, we're in pretty good shape. Personally, I'll never get over losing him, It's like, there's going to be that whole, and listen, that's what happens in life though. The shoe drops, and I abide by a saying or a theory or an ideal, if you will, that I would rather miss somebody than to have never had them in my life, and I will miss Paul forever, but I'm so grateful that I spent, he died, what's going to be 7 years ago, 21, 22 years in very close proximity, making a lot of really good music together, And I always tell people, his story is about missing somebody, and in Paul's story, it's got a happy ending. Sometimes in life, it doesn't have a happy ending. It just ends, But if you miss somebody, that means they were important in your life. And I'll keep it empty, my dining room table upstairs, in his honor and anybody else that I've lost in my life. Because the shoe drops, dude. That's life,
Yeah.
But I want to make him proud by continuing on the work that he started. And to know that his story and his message and his work is alive and well, and people are constantly falling in love with it. And he said, long past we're all gone. We just weren't ready for that to occur yet. But there you go.
Have you ever stopped looking for him on stage? Do you ever find yourself not? I'd asked this to people, who are in music, who do acts and stuff, and who had lost a band member. And I said, do you ever stop looking for him? And they're like, not really. I find myself all the time just glancing back and seeing maybe they're there, maybe.
I don't know that I think of it in that way. I mean, accepting that is it takes a while to accept it. And, but there's not a song or a moment that goes by where I won't look over my shoulder and see him standing there, because that's where he stood for so many years, So I have this wonderful collection of memories, that I could just replay in my mind anytime I want, when I'm playing a song like Christmas in Sarajevo, sometimes I'll be playing it in front of 18,000 people. And I'll be thinking about sitting in, the recording studio with him, with his Diet 7-Up on the desk and, an ashtray full of old Marlboro cigarettes, whatever it was, when you could still do that, or when you still did that. Coming up with an idea, and say, what do you think of this, boss? And him say, yeah, I love that. Let's do that. And then playing it live. I have the entirety of our relationship right up here, and I can call upon it all the time. And listen, sometimes it makes you sad, sometimes it makes you smile. That's life.
I got to ask you this because you're one of the few people, and I'll be honest. I mean, we've all met a lot of musicians who are very good being musicians and very good on stage, but maybe not being able to describe it. So when I meet somebody who has all the words, and Al, you have all the words.
Oh, thank you.
Can you tell me what it's like to stand in front of 20,000 people and play as they just lose their brains?
I can. It's not sound hokey, but it's a dream come true every time I do it, because I've dreamt of it since 1964 when I was 2 years old and I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. So I don't get freaked out about it. You want to see me like panic? Hand me the remote control to a smart TV. I'm going to panic. I mean, I feel like Ozzy Osbourne yelling upstairs to my wife every 5 minutes. I can't even watch a football game anymore. It's like a series of events, whatever. But you put me in front of that stage, downstage center, 20,000, 200,000 people. I'm home. I'm safe. I'm good there, because I've been dreaming about this and doing it. 59 years later, here we are. And I'm appreciative of the fact that there's that many people there, because that meant that art form Paul was describing way back when turned out to be pretty good and accepted, and people got it, So sometimes you look at me and you can see a sense of pride, a sense of, it's been a long battle, a long journey, a lot of hours, like trying to perfect a craft that's not perfectible, listening to Jeff Beck play guitar, rest of his soul, and like going, God, I still suck. I got a lot of work to do. Or reading, Leonard Bernstein's biography, the great maestro, and saying, man, I'm not even close to the mark yet. So the journey is what really has me appreciating everything, and the fact that the audience is part of the journey, I'm just like, yeah, we're good. You can't text me and you can't call me for 2.5 hours. I'm happy.
Here's my take on it, because I get the feeling, I think you and I are about the same age. And we somebody asked me this the other day. I was at this event and somebody said, you've been doing this a long time. Do you ever get nervous? Do you ever worry that you're not going to have something to say when you turn the mic on? And my response is no. From the day one that I ever done this, from the first day I've ever done it, I was never nervous. Now I get excited, but I don't get nervous. And I don't worry about doing that it's going to, that process of performing is just who and what I am. And the way that you were talking about your level of artistry when it comes to music, you could sit back and compare yourself to Jeff Beck, but the newsflash is, and it's done as good as I do, Jeff Beck probably thought he sucked too. He probably listened to, who, Stephen Vai or Clapton or anybody, and probably goes, I can't do that. But what you do is you lose the genius of what you are.
But isn't that
the human condition?
Yeah, dude, there's always somebody better. You can go, I'll drink from the same well as somebody, but, whoever that hero of mine is, drink from a different well. And it's the journey. This is a forever process. Being afraid, being nervous. The only time I'm ever nervous is if I'm unprepared. You want to talk about a terrifying moment in my life is if for some, and I don't recall ever doing this, but not feeling 100% that I've done as much work as humanly possible to prepare for the moment. That'll make me scared. Like I've been an amateur boxer for about 15 years now. And when I say amateur, I should just say entry level horrible boxer, but albeit another art form that I enjoy very, very much. And I'm always scared when the bell rings to spar because I ain't ready. I'm not ready. I have not done nearly enough work to combat a 25-year-old who's twice my size and half my age across the other side of the ring, who's looking at me like when we were kids watching a cartoon and the dog just sees a lamb chop hanging. You know what I mean? That's scary, you know? Or, the downbeat of a solo acoustic guitar song. That's a little stressful of a moment for me
Really?
because you're not, oh yeah, dude, that guitar is out of tune. If I miss the string accidentally, maybe nobody will notice it, but I'll notice it. Now that has a habit of derailing my thought process, and I'll concentrate on the mistake I just made and continue tumbling over. So I'm only jumpy, not nervous, but I'm jumpy anytime I have to play that acoustic guitar in a sold out arena where you could hear a pin drop. And I'm kind of going through. You've played this song 25,000 times in your life. Just hit the opening chord, pal. All right, well, good. And then I'm fine. But that's the only time that or heaven forbid that I got to play live piano somewhere because I'm that good at it. Again, I'm not prepared. So I'll get a little nervous and then you get in your own head. But other than that, I'm the most comfortable, safe, relaxed ever is standing on that stage all around my neck.
Wow. See, now, a couple of things. Let me unpack this. You need to find a hobby where somebody's not going to hit you. That's just me. Right.
Yeah.
I could recommend golf. That's what I mean. Nobody's going to try to hit you on that. But second of all, it's funny that you say that because I cannot imagine any scenario where you would be more comfortable than when you're on stage with a guitar. I don't care the situation because you're so. It's the same thing. I mean, any virtuoso, it's a problem. You put him on stage with the violin, and I think he feels pretty good no matter what's going to happen. Even if it's out of tune, his artistry is going to take over. And I think the same thing about you.
I appreciate that. Listen, I tell people, I teach quite a bit when I'm off the road. Like Fridays and Saturdays, there's a little guitar shop here in my town, and I just wanted to kind of give back to the community a little bit. An art form that's been so very good to me. I got a bunch of kids playing, a bunch of retired doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs. They just want to play. And they always do say the same thing, man. Regardless of what a good relationship we've developed, it's still like student teacher. And they're like, man, I could do this at home so much better. I'm like, yeah, but you're never as good as you are when you're alone on your couch. A true artist is a solid B+ at all times in front of an audience. A really good one is like an A- or an A, because you're never 100% live. The journey, not the battle, but, the idea is to get your B+ to such a high level, that it's acceptable and it's still really, really, really good. The best I ever played the piano or the guitar or anything like that is I'm sitting on my couch in my pajamas, with the fireplace going and a glass of McCallum's fireplace. Ain't nobody watching. I don't got to think about, am I playing this right? Are they impressed? And that was the relationship. That's what made my relationship with Paul so wonderful and so special. For like the first couple of weeks that we were kicking the tires on a lot of things, I didn't know the man, and you have to be very, very, in my opinion, to be extremely vulnerable to bare your soul and play something meaningful or to create something meaningful. And I remember learning this lesson a long time ago from a guy named Desmond Child, who was producing one of the Alice Cooper records I was working on. Wonderful songwriter, ridiculously talented and successful. And he said, you need to drop the Long Island Italian bravado of tough guy. Okay? Because if I ask you to bring a solo or bring a part to life, you got to be okay with digging inside yourself and maybe decompartmentalizing that pain, that jubilation, that anguish, and all those things. You've got to be secure enough in yourself to open your heart and your soul to what's necessary and then put it back away when you want. And that's why my trust with Paul O'Neill and his trust with me, we could just be as intimate and vulnerable and sincere as we want in recording, because I think that's what the audience hears, is the truthfulness behind these songs and the message. So me on my couch, I'm crushing it. My wife walks in the room, I'm down to an A minus. Walk in the room, I'm playing head and shoulders, knees and toes, and I'm done.
Shoulders, knees.
That's
Okay. All right. I wasn't ready for that one. Hey, let me ask you off the top of your head. Who are your Mount Rushmore of guitarists? I mean, I know you've had to think about this, but just off the top of your head, who do you have on there? Who's your four picks?
Jeff Beck, Gary Moore, Leslie West, and the Allman Brothers. I'm going to lump them in. Both Dickie and Dwayne lumped into one.
Wow.
Okay.
Nice choice.
Thank you.
Those are impressive. Why are you all about? Are you more intrigued with technicality or with tone?
Note selection. Can you tell me an incredibly detailed story with as few notes as possible? You know, if I listen to Jeff Beck, it could be because we ended as lovers off the Blow by Blow album, or if you listen to one of his last works when he did Moon River with Eric Clapton. Got nothing to do with chops, this stuff. But there isn't anybody on God's earth, in my opinion, that could speak more clearly with a minimal amount of ingredients and just literally get my attention. Look, I grew up listening to Motown singers, you know? I mean, Marvin Gaye, Gladys Knight, all the Smokey Robinson, telling me they were the soundtrack of my life in the 60s, you know? So when I hear the sincerity, the vulnerability again in their voices, it's what I gravitate towards when I listen to instrumentalists. You know, when I listen to Wayne Shorter play saxophone on a remark he made in the Weather Report collection, he breaks my heart every time he does it. And it's not that many notes. You know, I remember 1978, I felt really awesome about like finally nailing the entirety of the guitar solo in a Ramblin' Man. You know?
Mm-hmm.
And I was at some random restaurant where I grew up on Long Island, and out of the jukebox came Eruption. First time I'd ever heard King Edward Van Halen play the guitar, I was like, oh, expletive, you know? Back to the drawing board. You know, I want you to tell me a story, you know, and I want to hear that. Gary Moore would be another one, you know, who like with very few notes would break your heart and tell you a story without the luxury of the written word, without, you know, there's no lyrics when it's an instrumental. Carlos Santana on Europa. How much did he sound like Miles Davis on that song in the phrasing and the restraint and the discipline to hold that one note just a little bit longer than mere mortals would have, you know?
Wow. See, I think I a brilliant answer. Absolutely brilliant answer. I love that because when you sit back and you think like it's so funny about the dichotomy because when I think Eddie Van Halen, I think technicality. I mean, he sounded great, but I mean, nobody had been going, you know, until that time, right? And there's same thing with Miles Davis. I love Miles Davis because, he would just, boop, ba, 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 ba. But at the same token, I would love Maynard Ferguson and Doc Severinsen because they could do things with a trumpet that nobody else could. It would be physically, Arturo Sandoval.
But again, it's like if you listen to any Beethoven symphony, you know, it's the overall dynamic that's being created, whether it's a lot of notes or a few notes. Okay, if you listen to the simplicity of the the melody of the Ninth Symphony, da 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 da. Okay, but it tells like it's so deep and it's so perfect. Like Leonard Bernstein said, the genius of Beethoven was the note he chose to succeed. And that blew my mind, you know? And his other quote was like, real artistry, and again, referring to Beethoven, is that it has to be accessible, but it can never, ever be ordinary. You know, and I just love that way of thinking. And the older I get, I whistle melodies. I don't whistle solos, you know? I listen to Who's Crying Now by Journey.
Yeah.
And I listen to Neil Sean's guitar solo. Da, 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 da. What a gorgeous melody. He wrote a song inside of the song. That's the stuff that gets my attention. And then if you can, you know, shred on top of it, that's another part of your vocabulary. But if you left me to pick one of them, you know, B.B. King didn't have to talk that much, you know, but what he said, he spoke volumes. But again, I come from that generation pre-King Edward Van Halen. Gary Rossington from Skinner, Stevie Gaines from Skinner, Leslie West, you know, one of my favorite people, never mind guitar players, and one of my earlier teachers who just said, "Hey kid, you get a good note, hang on to it." You know?
You can go all the way. See, I'm going to have to get you back on after the Christmas season so we can just nerd out on music, because I want to get your take on Rush. I want to get your take on all these different guys and also all this stuff. But I have to ask you, because my time is running out, and you're so busy, and you're so generous with your time. But I would be remiss if I did not ask you, what's Christmas Day like at Al Pitrelli's house?
Don't know. Haven't been there in a long time.
Really? Do you guys push Christmas off? I mean, do you do it? I mean, do you do it a week later, or what do you do?
Christmas, depending on what city the show is the day after Christmas, it's too dangerous to try to travel home. A, in the holidays. B, the weather. Also the a flight's delayed or a flight's canceled because of snow at Newark, and I got to get, to San Jose, or this year I'll be in Indianapolis. It's not worth it. And we've been doing it for so long that's what's become my norm, is celebrating Christmas at usually pretty bougie, but, hotel. And my 3 older children would, fly in and visit me, wherever we would be. And my wife and my young daughters, up until COVID, come hell or high water, they're going to be whatever city I'm going to be in for Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, and then celebrate the show with me the following day. Now, obviously, since COVID, they haven't been able to do that. But this year, I think it looks like, it'll be okay for them to travel. And I'm going to spend Christmas Eve and Christmas Day with them in Indianapolis. And my daughter, Layla, who's 7 years old now, hasn't seen me play since she's 3, so she really doesn't have any recollection. And that's going to be one of the moments over the course of the tour that I'm very much looking forward to. I don't want to rush to it yet because I love every show. But if you're, anybody who's going to be at the Indianapolis show, if you want to see a little extra sparkle in my eye, that's because I just saw my daughter, who didn't know, she really don't know what Daddy does for a living. And that to me is awesome.
That's so much fun. It's so much fun when they get there. Well, that's why Michael Jackson went back on tour, because his kids had never seen him be Michael Jackson. I mean, and he died tragically before he got it, but that's what he wanted. He just wanted his kids to see him be, this is what I do. You need to see this.
And be there for it.
That is so doggone cool. I could monopolize your entire afternoon. You realize that, right? Don't you?
Dude, anytime you want. Listen, I'll do this again with you all the time. If I put a Les Paul around my neck, or if my daughter jumps on my lap, we're done. Other than that, it's me and you.
Hey, well, you go travel. I don't know, how many shows do you have that'll come up in the Christmas season of 2023? How many shows?
I think 100 and something shows in 45 days.
You're a beast. You're a beast, my friend. You are.
As long as I'm still, I'll still be playing, But it's people like yourself who take their time out to talk to me about it. And your listeners and people who are watching this just understand how important this is that Paul created, and how it is important. And, I hope people come out. I hope my repeat offenders come back out. And I hope that someone who's never seen us before, maybe due to this conversation, be like, let me go see what this is all about. And start becoming repeat offenders and bringing their grandparents and their grandchildren with them, Because in closing, I'll leave you with this one. Nothing really makes me much happier than looking down into the audience and seeing a 4-year-old little girl on her granddaddy's lap. And she's standing on his lap, and they're nose to nose. And every time the pyro goes off, she grabs his neck a little tighter. And then they both, make the metal sign in the air. You don't see that often in life, dude.
You don't see it enough. Al, until we talk again, but if I don't get a chance to see you, Merry Christmas.